Hi guys, it's really nice to meet you yesterday. I've just been having a quick think about the best way to make sure that everything that we learnt last night exercise-wise is available to you, so that way you can refer back and also put something together for your exercise too. So this is going to be exercise 1. I'm going to do a little video just recapping everything we did last night, so that way you'll have the skills to progress forward with your assessment. So let's go into Illustrator and we'll do that first exercise with setting up our name and doing the color conversions. So we're going to set up a new document. We have new in the palette here. We can go use the shortcut as provided, or we can go up to File, New. Now this sort of palette might look a little bit different depending on the version of Illustrator that you're working on. The most current CC has some presets up the top for print, mobile, web. What we're going to do is actually focus on this preset detail over here on the right. Because we're going to start off with a CMYK project with the aim of actually printing, we're going to make sure that we're doing it in millimeters. We're going to change 210 by 210, which is the width of a portrait A4. This is my standard sort of to start designing. That's only because I work from home and I've got a home printer, and I know that if I have that width I can print it out and test it myself. So I just use 210 by 210 as my working file, so to speak. So I'm going to make sure that we don't need bleed for this exercise, but we do need to make sure that the color mode is set to CMYK. So once you've done that, you've done your 210 by 210 millimeters, and you've set the CMYK, you can click Create. Okay. Excellent. So here's our new artboard. I'm just going to zoom out a little bit. Now, yesterday we were talking a little bit about the tools of what goes on here. Here's your toolbar. We have our selection tool, keyboard shortcut V, our direct selection tool. Now I know that Gail did ask about how I selected certain things yesterday. This is the tool that I used. It's a direct selection, so A is the keyboard shortcut just to pull up that thing. So we've got the V and the A. Creating just standard objects, we have this these options here of just a standard rectangle, polygon, star tool. In the next couple of weeks I'm going to show you a little bit about this. You're going to need to learn this as part of this tool as part of your course, and knowing these programs later on. This applies for Photoshop and sometimes in InDesign, but mainly in Illustrator we use this pen tool, and it does take a little practice, but I'll just show you now so you can get a little bit of an idea. If we put a little point on there and we do another point, hold shift, it gives you a straight line, and then one more point, but don't hold shift, or we can hold shift just to collect it, but don't unclick, and then unleash the shift and hold this and just slide that around with your cursor. You'll see what we have here is a Bezier curve. Now this tool itself does take some time and a bit of practice, but I will show you that's the function of that tool, is that it does move around. So if I delete that object and start again with a new tooltip, I can create any kind of shape I want, nice curves and bits and pieces. Like if I click Option at a point, I can actually turn that around and go the other way. So these kind of things take a little bit of practice to move around, and they are hugely important for tasks like deep etching, selection, and designing your own thing. You're designing your own objects outside of the usual square and triangle. So you can get some really nice shapes. Once you get a bit of a hang of it, you can get some really nice curves. Things like anything that's sort of Illustrator based, you can create these sort of really beautiful shapes and start getting some nice objects happening out of them. So lots and lots of things, lots to play with and lots to learn in the future, but I'll just show you that just in case you do want to play with it outside of just doing a standard box. Now I'll go to our type tool. I'll just click type, and just click it simply and just do Xanthi. And I will go to my character palette. Now my character palette can be found here, or I can always find it in my windows. Another alternative is by looking at the keyboard shortcut. So over on the right hand here you can see it's Command T on a Mac. I'm pretty sure it might be, is it Control T on a PC? And that should bring up that palette. Now I'm going to use Montserrat, and I'm going to choose bold. If I click and hold shift and drag that up, I can manually scale that to however I'd like and have that freedom to do that. Or I can go into my character palette and just manipulate it, point by point. OCD 90. I'm going to now outline that font, and there's a couple of ways to do that. So this is no longer live type, this is now outlined. I can do expand, which will bring up this palette of object and fill. Expanding just makes sure that the shape is by itself now a vector. This is actually going to be helpful when we learn about strokes and some more textural stuff in design, in Illustrator. So I'm just going to let you know that this is it. So we'll do this outline here. Or the alternative is you can just go Apple or the Command, Shift and O, and that should do it as well. So back to that that selection tool and the direct selection tool. If I do that, the black arrow, I can click the whole thing. If I do the white arrow, I actually bring up all of those objects, all of those little points. Now when I was showing you the pen tool, that's what we place, are those points. If we zoom in to those points, you might actually see just a little trick. If you double click on one of those, it'll show you can do some cool stuff with it and start moving some corners around. There are some beautiful flexibility things we can do here. So with that direct selection, I'm going to just click on those 2 points, those 4 points at the top, and I'm just going to drag them up, move them around a little bit. I'm going to make a circle, and I can just either go into here, and I can use just a keyboard shortcut of just a standard L, and I'm just going to click, hold shift, and drag that to the size that I want. So there's my little dinka person, direct selection. Let's move that up there. Make it weird looking. Fantastic. Nice and weird. Lovely. Okay, so now what we have is a quick overview of how to get text, how to change that to an actual object, and now we've moved around a little bit with the direct selection tool, the white arrow. Now we're going to go into our color palette, so I'm just going to close that back and we're going to focus on the swatches and the color. So if you can't find these on your right hand side palettes, you'll always be able to find your swatches from your window, and your swatches are here and your color is here, so you should be able to find those. They should be able to pop up. So for the purpose of this exercise, we are going to remove these default swatches. I'm just going to click delete. So what I've done there is I've clicked the first one, I've held shift, and I've clicked the last one. So it just copies all of those, and then I'll click delete. Delete, yes please. Okay, so I'm going to select the objects that I want. I've done the direct selection tool there. And I am going to first drop down the key, because the key is the black and it's always going to look black no matter what I throw into it. If I put more magenta, it's always going to look black. So I'll just drop the key down first. We'll start off at white, and I'm just going to make a really simple blue. I'll go to 80, I'll just type that in, 80, and I'll throw in about 30% magenta, 5 yellow, why not? So now I've got my colours, I've selected there, I've got my CMYK channels all put in by their percentages. It should be a pretty clear-ish colour, this one. When it comes out, it probably wouldn't, as soon as it starts getting a bit murky, I'll start putting some key into there. So if I just drop that black back, that channel, we should be looking pretty good. I'll just drop that back. Okay, so what we're going to do now that we've selected that colour and we like that colour, we're going to create a swatch. So we're just going to select this here, and it's going to pop up new swatch panel, and we're just going to say, alright, we want it to be blue, and we're going to say CMYK. Now you don't need to label these, but the reason why I'm teaching you how to label these is because it's going to be important later on when we start labeling PMS for knife lines and other things like spot UVs. So it's good practice just at the start that you understand why we're doing this now, is because it actually helps us later on. And I'm saying later on, probably back in September when I teach you packaging, this will be really important. So just for now, for this purpose, because we do have multiple blues in the document, we're going to just change it and say blue, CMYK. We're going to make sure that the colour mode is CMYK, checking all of that and selecting OK. So now what we've created is a blue CMYK swatch. And if we just select 1, 2, 3 of those objects using our direct selection, and say I double click that again and I clicked global, now these 3 objects are now assigned to the new swatch, and this means that if I go into that, if I change that in any way, only those objects, I'll click preview, how about that, only those objects will change. Now, like I was saying last night, this is really great. It's really great to set up your colours in global from the start, because if you're doing, say if you're doing a vector sort of style face illustration for a character and you don't like the skin tone, or the client says, oh, you know, it needs to be a little bit more blue in this color, this document, if you have that global selected, that means that you can go back later on into the document and recolor the whole thing simply by just using this, that everything that's selected. So because we didn't select the A, N and H before we chose the global, that won't apply to it, so it'll still have that original colouring. So if I select them all now, make sure they're all the global, that's really good practice to have. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to select M, or I'm going to select this, and the reason why I say M is that's the shortcut for the rectangle tool. I'm going to just make my swatch. Now, I don't need to make it pretty now, I'll make it pretty, you know, we can do that later on. It's just that I get that information. And I'm going to put text. I'm going to actually just write what that key is. So that's massive. I'm just going to write CMYK. I better do the YK. Just going to select it, and I'm going to Apple T, go to my palette. Just going to make that 10 point, just nice, just small so I can read it. So it's just so that way we visually have that information, so that anyone who picks up this file, whether it's printed, a style guide, whatnot, they'll know that this CMYK, what their values are. So we'll double click this just to check again. So CMYK 80, 30, 0 and 0. So let's write this. 80, 30, 0 and 0. So I'm just going to make that black. Just reduce that down a bit. Excellent. So that's it. We have our first CMYK swatch. Now for this, we're going to try again. We're going to take that key all the way down, boost all the way up on the yellow. We're going to throw in a little bit of magenta. We'll just do 40, 45, 50. Okay, so we just have a pretty basic orange there. You see it's magenta 50, yellow 100%. Now that we've sort of selected that colour, we're going to go click. We're going to go up here, say orange, and just for our purposes, CMYK, so that we know, we're going to select global. So the object is selected and the colour has now been assigned. Click OK, and we should have the 2 dinkers on those swatches. So once again, I'm just going to copy and paste this. I'm going to show you a little trick. So you can do Command C, copy Command V, and that'll just throw you over there. Or if I undo, if I go Command F and slide across, I've just pasted that object in place. So I'll do that again. So copy, and I'll show you object, sorry, and paste in front. So what we're doing is actually pasting that same object so it's in position. So that way it just helps with aligning it, just a little knick-knack that we sort of get to do. I want to show you quickly while we do that. If I do a V, if I've got objects in this palette over here, align, or you can find it up here. In this palette we've got the align tool, and unless you've been exposed to InDesign, we'll see this a lot, and we use this a lot in Illustrator. So if I select CMYK and CMYK, I want them to be aligned. Ding, I've aligned them at the bottom. If I click those two, same again, align them at the bottom. So that's just a little helpful hint that just help you just get everything sort of nice and clean. We use that a lot rather than manually sitting there and going 1, 2, 3, 4, and trying to visually do it. It's all set in place. So just that again, we've just selected the object, we've copied it with Command C, and we've pasted in front with a Command F, and then I've just moved it across. So that's just a quick little paste in front, and then if I need to move things around, we have the align panel there. So I'm just going to use my color picker. So see that, not that tooltip, but that one there, that's our color picker. Or I could use just the keyboard shortcut of I can go and click that, and it's actually assigned that color without too much drama. So color picker helps. We just need to change that CMYK value. So let's double click on that. We know it's 0, 50, 100, and 0. So I'll go over here. 0, 50, 100, and 0. Excellent. So for this exercise, we've decided that we started off with CMYK and that we have to match a PMS. The reason why I've done it this way is because this actually happens, even though this is not the ideal way for designing logos. If you're stuck, this is going to be your best matching system. So what we do to actually go from a CMYK and to a PMS spot color match is we select the item that we want to change, and we go up here. So edit colors, recolor with preset, and one color job. So like I said, it's not an ideal solution, but it happens so often, and what's happening in this is that the computer is helping us match as much as possible, so using their data. So what happens when we select that is we come up with the option to select a library, and we're actually going to select only in the PMS range, Pantone range, we're only going to choose Pantone Solid. Now there are other options, things like metallics, pastels, neons, metallic, coated, uncoated, whatnot. This is the best one to use for branding purposes, because the solid actually has a little bit more, solid coated has a little bit more saturation and a little bit more colour, a little bit more colour punch as opposed to an uncoated, which is really quite flat. So from a design branding point of view, this is the predominant preset that we like to use. So I've selected that and I click OK, and it should come up with current colours and the new. So we're going to double click on this, and this is going to show us what our recommended, and I do stress recommended, it's not an exact match, recommended Pantone selection is. So just remember that 639, and the C at the end refers to that coated. If we did select uncoated, we would have a U. So here we've got the C. So we're just going to select that 639, that looks great. We're going to go OK. Now you see in our swatch palette we have our Dinka Dinka with a little spot. Now this applies for InDesign as well. When you see a swatch with a little spot, it means that it's a PMS color. So we're just going to make sure that that's locked in. Yep. And we can see here that we've got in our color, we can actually see that now that it's we've got global and we've got swatches, we can scale that tone down. So that one color can be 80% of it. You can drop it down to 40%. So it actually becomes sort of more more tonal. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to new line, PMS, and it was 639-ish, 639C. Sorry, let me just double check that. Don't think it was 639C. Oh, yeah, there we go. Fantastic. So just cancel that. So that's beautiful. We've got this now assigned to our Pantone color. So we've identified what that color that we want is. Now we're going to choose the orange, and we're going to do that process again. So we're going to go Edit Colors, Recolor with Preset, One Color Job. And there we go. We're going to go down, we're going to select that library, that little icon, all the way down to Pantone Solid Coated. Right, okay. Now we're going to double click on this. Go, yeah, that looks really cool, really like that color, 1495C. That matches my Pantone book. So we're going 1495C. And we're going to select it. So once again, we do have that ability to change the tone of that, and that's sort of just that percentage as its own channel. So I'm going to 1495C, yes, 1495C. So now I've assigned what that Pantone color is I want for that orange. Now, yesterday when we were looking at this, we were talking about when we're wanting to know what mode we're working in. Even though we assign the document ourselves as CMYK, if we're receiving a file, the quickest way to actually look at it, there's a way up here. You can always identify what mode you're working in by your tab up the top. So the CMYK up there, and it's the GPU, which is just your processing preview. So if you've got it on an overprint preview, this is just a high graphics processing GPU. But the CMYK is what we're concerned about. So now that we do have our CMYK set in, I do want to show you the location first. Before we change to RGB, I want to show you the location of your swatch libraries. We go into our swatches panel. We go over here to our right, and that's a little menu item for the swatches. We go down to the bottom. Now they've just hidden this, and it's really quite annoying. I'll move this over here. They've just relocated this, so it's now Open Swatch Library, over to Color Books, and that's where we find our library for our Pantones. So there are other defaults that come in that are just more guidelines and recommendations. For instance, like Celebration, it opens up a palette of really poppy colors. You know, so it just gives you a color palette, a nice color palette. Where a solid coated, we'll have to go back that way. Sorry, I'll delete that. Celebration, we can go in and find more via our swatches panel, and they're just sort of suggested, suggested color combinations, so to speak. But when we actually need to use swatches for Pantones, and this just doesn't apply for actually choosing color. This also applies for when we actually start assigning things like knife lines for packaging. Spot UVs, any other kind of specials for printing processes. We always use Pantone solid coated. So to find that, we always go to our menu, Open Swatch Library, Color Books, and Pantone solid coated. So this will open up another palette. They're usually coming together. Well, we can get rid of that anyway. But this is how we would find that. If I was to put a knife line on, I usually just choose a pink, for instance. So out of my Pantone library, you can choose any. So sometimes people have knife, sometimes they put another colour in for instruction, bleed, whatnot. So what they do, instead of, when we were talking about it yesterday, and before, they would actually just assign that swatch a knife. So that's the concept behind that when it comes to designing for packaging. So that's why we actually see over here we now have knife assigned. So it's no longer a PMS. It is a PMS, but it's no longer a PMS color code, it's actually assigned a knife, so that way we know when we're using it that's a specific knife line. There are other points to this, such as we need to assign that color over print, but that's for another lesson later down the track. So I'm just going to delete that, but that's that theory behind and the reason why we do label our swatches. Okay, so I'll delete that. So now that we know where the location of those PMS swatches are, if we were to start with a file, that's how we would find them. So we'd go into that swatch library, colour books, and solid coated, and say we were searching for 1495, we just type it up here and it'll put it in. So you wouldn't select a swatch based off this. You wouldn't go, oh, I like that colour. You'd actually have to know what you're looking for to come in here. Okay, so PMS done. Let's go into RGB. Move this back off our artboard a little bit. Okay, so going over to back to this CMYK, if we go up to File and we go to Documents Color Mode, scroll across down to RGB, we check up here. We've now changed our color mode for this document. It's no longer CMYK. Now to choose these values for RGB, I'm just going to select all the blues, go back to the CMYK. I'm just going to duplicate that swatch by clicking that and doing it again. And all of a sudden, let me just rename that RGB. We can see here we've got 0, 145 and 208. So we've been assigned our RGB now. So we're just going to move that to the end, so that way we can see. With the yellow or the gold, orange, whatever we're going to call it, those two, assign it, make sure it's that yellow. We're going to click on a new swatch. There we go. There's our RGB visible there. We're going to go RGB. Select. Right. So we're just going to put those codes in and make sure that they're all visible. So double click that so we know 0, 145, 208. We're just going to document that. So 0, 145, 208. RGB. Excellent. So, and the same for this RGB. Just going to find out what that is. Double click. 247, 148, 29. 247, 145, was it 209? I can't remember. I have to do this again, sorry. 29. Excellent. Okie dokie. So now we've actually broken down what our colour values are. We've matched them across the 3 modes. Now for library purposes, if this was going to be a regular client or if this is your own branding and you wanted to put this into a library that you want to go across the different modes, it's always best to use the folder, and I say RGB. So another folder, collect the PMS, okay, and then collect the CMYK, CMYK. It's just a little neat way to do sort of things, and we can just sort of, from there, we can start assigning different bits and pieces to it. Okay, and that's that task done. So if you have any questions, please feel free to, I don't know if you wanted to add me to your Facebook group or if you wanted to email school and get them to email me or whatnot, either. So just let me know. But this should really start helping you with your assessment. So once you start having a little play, things will start getting familiar. So you want to start remembering how to use these tools. Have a bit of a play if you can with the pen tool. There's some other little points, but focusing on the pen tool might give you some cool shapes. And sort of start having a bit of a tinker with it. Your text, your shapes. There's things like the rotate. Your colour picker is important just for some of these purposes. If you want to start getting fancy, I wanted to show you quickly this little thing here. The foreground and the stroke. So we can also do colour picking here. You can also identify our hex. So the hex for that blue is over here. So I've just copied that. I can pop that in. So remember, hex is used, it's essentially the same sort of concept as the RGB. It's just a different way of labeling it with, it's a numeric 6-digit code, numerals and letters, and it just identifies what that RGB value is. It's used for coding predominantly. So if I double click that, I can actually find that hex code there. Also see what these values are here. Now, because we have changed the RGB mode, the CMYK has come off a little bit. But as long as we have that information down here, then someone who picks this up later on can always double check. Alright, we're just going to cancel that. I'm just going to throw that here so I know what that hex is. And then, ta-da! So, this should be cool. So back to what these do, I'll select that. If I put this here, that's our stroke. So in our CMYK, we're working RGB. I can put a stroke around that. If I wanted to do this, I can put a blue stroke around that RGB. So you can see what we've done there. You can change the strength of the stroke as well. There's a little icon there, stroke. It should show a panel, or you can find it in your window, and stroke. And here you can change your width. Stroke's really handy as well, just in case you do want to have a bit of a play. For your brushes, if you select B, or go into this tooltip, you can start using brushes to sort of start really drawing and doing some fun stuff. So, kind of like your pen tool, this has the little, it still works with that same principle of using these little anchor points. You can move them around, but your brush tool is kind of fun just to sort of start doing some stuff. So do some squiggles and whatnot, and then you can sort of go around and sort of start changing the weight. This might help you creatively just to sort of start playing with things. Showing options, yeah. Sorry, I want my brushes panel. There's a brushes panel, and we can sort of start doing some calligraphy. There's a brush library as well, so there's some artistic brushes. You might like to sort of explore some charcoal, so it'll just bring up some things. And it's not drawing down. Some different kind of brushes that have a bit, a bit more textual context to them. Adding thick makes them a bit gunky, but some of them are quite alright when they're thin. It just depends. When using a stroke to sort of expand, when using a stroke, you can also go to that object and expand appearance. Can't even see it. And that makes that no longer a stroke but an object. So now you can move some of that thick detail out. Let me just hide some of these for you. So you can move that around. Have a play, enjoy, don't get too scared, don't get caught up in it, and don't try and stress too much, because you're not expected to know everything from the start, and it is very trial and error. Now's the time to be creative and enjoy. And I know enjoy is a hard word when you've got deadlines and pressures and work life and home life, but try and enjoy just having a bit of an explore. I do recommend that you go online and look at Linda. She has some very good tutorials online. YouTube's very good. I've also put in our student resources Dropbox. I've put a little note about some of the fonts. Ideally, I don't want to see any system fonts, and you shouldn't be using system fonts anymore, because now you're designers now. We should be looking at using some really cool fonts. And I've put together a list, and you'll find that PDF in the Dropbox. So if we go into, HDS, I'll just show you, student resources, and I've put in here the PowerPoint, but I've also put where to find free fonts. So I'd like you to find a nice body font just to install in your system. Font Squirrel has a fair few standard ones. Montserrat is HDS's standard font, but they have other ones as well. Open Sans, Lato, you know, they got a nice range of weights for just body, big chunks of text. Some display fonts. Behance is a really good way to find on-trend designers. Lost Type Co. is a very well-known type foundry. They specialise in very nice fonts. Font Fabric, they have a range of free fonts, about 100 or so. They're not too bad. Duff Font is really designed by amateurs, but they're really good for just really short headlines and things like that. Font Space, just another catalogue of fonts, and they're okay. I don't think you need to buy fonts. I don't think that that's something that, you know, you should really worry about when you're studying, and that sort of stuff that if I'm buying a font, I will buy it, you know, on behalf of the client, and it's all about licensing. So the best place for fonts, hands down, out of all of these things, is myfonts.com. But don't buy any fonts while you're studying. It's not worth it. You'll get by just purely on these top 2 body fonts and display fonts resources. And remember, with fonts there is licensing, so don't use these fonts for commercial use. You can only use them for personal use, or just check the licensing that you're not putting them in logos without editing them and whatnot. If you have any questions about licensing, just flick me an email. I'm pretty happy to discuss it. But majority of these, top 2 display fonts and body fonts will be perfect for your category, for where you're at now. So yeah, do not use system fonts in this course. I don't want to see any system fonts. You're a designer, so start getting excited about it. Another thing I'd like to show you is I have an Explore of Adobe Cooler. I forgot to mention this last night, and I think it's really, really handy. I use this a lot for coming up with new color palettes. If we go to that link, it takes us to this really, really cool Adobe resource. You've got your RGBs and hexes in there, but you can explore themes, and I can type in, themes about sun, and this is all used or defined, so it's not, it's just what people are doing on trend. So people have actually gone in and created a whole heap of these as their own. You can choose, most popular. So this is kind of a good way to find out what colours are really trending in the industry from a design point of view. Most of this is all web-based, but a lot of it comes through in branding. Like some of these systems are really great. You can like and appreciate, you can save it. I use this a lot for coming up with new colour schemes, because it's all done, it's all there. You can also create your own. So back to some of that colour theory, we've got different ways we can move this around, slide these around, and really just sort of start playing with some of these combinations. And it's a fantastic resource for selecting the color palette. Really, it's you've got complementary colors, and you can do the different chromas in there, and pull it through. So shades, so you can just choose one and get the shade. So there's a whole lot of thing, and you can just do it custom. So you can go, all right, I like that color, but I want that one to be this, and so you can choose your base colors and have a muck around. So it's so much fun. So have an explore. Enjoy, and you're not expected to know everything, but hopefully I've given you some tools in this exercise 1 that will help you with your assessment. Cool bananas. All right, I'll record the next one in the next video. Ciao, ciao.